In 2007, McLaren were part of the biggest scandal in Formula 1 history, with one of McLaren's engineers gaining access to 780 pages of technical documentation on Ferrari's current F1 car. You're probably aware that McLaren were eventually disqualified from the 2007 season and that they were fined an incredible $100 million, which still to this day is the largest fine in sporting history. However, there is so much more to this story, including Alonso's key role, Ron Dennis's continuing misdirection of the press at FIA, and biggest of all, the mystery surrounding Hamilton's title loss that year. Is it possible that McLaren ensured that both Hamilton and Alonso didn't win the title in 2007? This is an epic tale that you're not going to want to miss.
The World Motorsport Council received statements from Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton and Pedro de la Rosa, stating categorically that no Ferrari information had been used by McLaren and that they had not passed any confidential data to the team.
I think in reality this was a story that began in the 1990s. Long before the scandal actually took place. And to really understand what happened and the lengths that the team would have been willing to go to, we first need to look at the McLaren of that era, and in particular, Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis's Project 4 racing merger with McLaren had put him in charge and brought the team to their most successful decade in the sport. They had taken 7 championships in the 1980s with Senna, Prost and Lauda, and they looked set to continue this into the 1990s. They dominated the early years, taking back-to-back championships in 1990 and 1991 with Ayrton Senna. However, this is where Dennis's run of glory would end and the struggle for McLaren would begin for nearly a decade. Williams' new active suspension and the designs that Adrian Newey and his team had brought had made the team dominant in the 1990s. However, to add to McLaren's woes, Honda pulled out of the sport, leaving them in search of a new engine supplier. After a deal with Renault, who were Williams' engine supplier at the time, fell through, and the Lamborghini V12 test didn't go as well as hoped, McLaren eventually settled on Peugeot. This partnership worked out so badly that it barely lasted the entire 1994 season. Thankfully for McLaren and Dennis, a partnership with a small German manufacturer named Mercedes would be struck for the 1995 season. This is a partnership that would eventually bring the team to success, but in 1996 they had their 3rd winless season, a streak that wouldn't be broken until David Coulthard took a win at the opening race in 1997 at Australia. That win was the start of McLaren's return to the top, in a year in which Adrian Newey had joined the McLaren team and was a vital hire who got the 1998 regulations absolutely spot on. And this, combined with Williams losing their Renault work engines, led McLaren to take both championships in 1998. Sadly for McLaren, this return to form would only last for 2 seasons, with them taking the Drivers' Championship in 1999 but losing out the Constructors' Championship to Ferrari. At this point they were in for another near-decade wait for a return to the top, as Ferrari went on an unprecedented run of dominance, which was then handed over to Renault and Alonso. Throughout these years, McLaren were hampered by tyre issues, massive reliability issues, and even FIA safety concerns with their 2003 car. In 2006, their golden goose Adrian Newey decided to leave for the fledgling Red Bull team. Dennis needed a solution to get McLaren back to the front, and he needed it fast. He now had the driver lineup for 2007 that, in hindsight, is one of the strongest in history with Alonso and Hamilton, but McLaren just needed a car to give them so that they could win. Enter Nigel Stepney, Mike Coughlin and his wife Trudy Coughlin, as well as a photocopying shop employee who would cost the McLaren team the 2007 Constructors title and $100 million. still the largest fine in sporting history. So this is where the story starts to go down a winding road of madness, with a range of characters involved, and not only including Ron Dennis, but also including the likes of Alonso, and even as far-ranging as Renault. I think the best way for us to unpack this story correctly is to follow a timeline of events, give the facts that we absolutely know are true, and then we can go and unpack the mystery that still surrounds 2007 and everything we know about that. So it all begins in February of 2007. Nigel Stepney had been part of the Ferrari Dream Team that included Ross Brawn and of course Michael Schumacher, who led the team to their wild success in the 1990s and for the first half of the 2000s. However, after losing the 2005 and 2006 World Championships to Renault, the team had decided to reorganise, and this pushed Ross Brawn to leave the team, and that month Stepney was quoted as saying, "I am looking at spending a year away from Ferrari. I'm currently not happy with the situation within the team. I really want to move forward with my career, and that's something that's not happening right now. Ideally, I'd like to move into a new environment here at Ferrari, but if an opportunity arose from another team, I would definitely consider it." After these comments, Ferrari announced that Stepney had been given a new role within the team as head of team performance development. In this statement, they announced, "After many years spent working at Formula One circuits, the last 13 of those as part of the Ferrari race team, Nigel Stepney, with the approval of the company, has chosen to take on a different role that will no longer see him attend races." Something didn't sit right with all of this. It was then around June of 2007 that the real meat of this story begins to get unpacked, with the Ferrari at the United States Grand Prix announcing publicly that they had started an internal investigation against Stepney, but at that time it was for reasons unknown to the public. Jumping to July 3rd, reports began to hit the media that Ferrari had completed this internal investigation and as a result removed Stepney from the team. Ferrari then announced on that very same day that he had been let go due to irregularities discovered at the Ferrari factory prior to the Monaco GP. On the same day as well, things began to appear even more bizarre as Ferrari announced in a press release that it was going to take further action against a Vodafone McLaren Mercedes engineer. Ferrari announces it has recently presented a case against Nigel Stepney and an engineer from Vodafone McLaren Mercedes with the Modena Tribunal concerning the theft of technical information. Furthermore, legal action has been instigated in England and a search warrant has been issued concerning the engineer. This produced a positive outcome. We would later, thanks to Autosport.com, learn that the engineer in question was one Mike Coughlin and that the search warrant had been for his home. The positive outcome that Ferrari expressed were the fact that the documents had in fact been recovered from the home of Coughlin and that these documents were in fact from the Maranello factory and pertained to Ferrari's current F1 car. The plot was beginning to thicken. 7 days later, on July 10th of 2007, a High Court hearing was held and adjourned for 1 day to allow Coughlin to submit an affidavit of the events surrounding the case. This was when the bizarre events surrounding what had taken place began to leak to the press. It seemed that someone had passed Coughlin 780 pages of technical information on the 2007 Ferrari F1 car, the F2007. And then Coughlin's wife Trudy had taken these documents to a local photocopying shop in Woking. Ferrari at this point were unaware that the documents had even been removed from their Maranello factory until an employee from the photocopying shop noticed the documents were marked confidential and contained the Ferrari stamp. At this point he called the company's HQ in Italy to inform them of this information. Clearly Woking has a few F1 fans. Coughlin never submitted the affidavit the next day for fears that it would be used against him in the trial playing out It wouldn't make a difference though, as Ferrari dropped its high court case in return for the full disclosure of all that Coughlin knew about the case and a promise of future cooperation. On the 16th of July, McLaren announced that it had finished its internal investigation and stated no Ferrari materials or data are or have ever been in the possession of any McLaren employee other than the individual sued by Ferrari. The fact that he held at his home unsolicited materials from Ferrari was not known to any other member of the team prior to July 3rd. Earlier in July, McLaren had tried to get ahead of all this by inviting the FIA to review their car. In a statement from McLaren, it was announced that in order to address some of the speculation, McLaren has invited the FIA to conduct a full review of its cars to satisfy itself that the team has not benefited from any intellectual property of another competitor. On the 26th of July 2007, following a meeting of the FIA Motorsport Council with McLaren, it was announced that no use of materials had been found, no breach of the rules by McLaren had been noted. The FIA essentially gave the McLaren team the all clear, and McLaren stated a unanimous decision had been taken by the FIA, which in McLaren's opinion is very fair and balanced. Ferrari though still weren't happy, saying that the ruling was incomprehensible and that they were furious at the decision. The case was then referred to the FIA's International Court of Appeals, and a date was set for the 13th of September in 2007. We knew at some point McLaren would try to fight back before the Court of Appeals date. They had to. If they were to lose, they would lose everything they had put into their 2007 car, and given the stakes at hand and the allegations surrounding it, possibly their 2008 car as well. So in August of 2007, Ron Dennis began to punch back. On the 1st of August, Ron Dennis, in an open letter to the president of the Italian Motorsport Authority, Luigi Macaluso, accused Ferrari of giving a false and dishonest version of the events that took place, and further that the car that was used to win the 2007 Australian Grand Prix was illegal. His letter went on to allege that the floor used by Ferrari in that particular race was illegal, falling under the activity of whistleblowing. The point of this was that Dennis was pushing the angle that this hadn't been a transfer of technical information for McLaren to use, but instead to out Ferrari's illegal breaking of the sporting technical regulations. This would then explain why Ferrari had dropped the case against Coughlin so quickly upon recovering the documents. It did have the semblance of truth, but was it accurate? A few days later at the Hungarian Grand Prix, a few more pieces and characters would be added to this already winding tapestry of a debacle. The weekend will go down as one of McLaren's most controversial, even just on the track itself. Lewis Hamilton had disobeyed a team instruction which had disadvantaged Fernando Alonso, and so Alonso held Hamilton up in the pit lane during qualifying, denying Hamilton a chance to record a final lap time. Ron Dennis was seen throwing his headphones to the ground and later having a heated discussion with both Alonso and his trainer throughout the day. On the day of the race, Alonso met Ron Dennis in his motorhome and allegedly threatened to send his email exchanges with McLaren test driver Pedro de la Rosa and Coughlin to the FIA. We know this as Max Mosley later stated Ron Dennis informed him of the conversation and told Mosley that the threat was an empty one. There was no information, there's nothing to come out, and I can assure you that if there was something there, Max, I would have told you. As we would later learn though, these threats from Alonso weren't as empty as Ron Dennis would lead everyone to believe, and that the most expensive can of worms in all of sporting history was about to blow up in his face. On the 5th of September 2007, the FIA announced that it had new evidence in the case. Instead of the appeal hearing, the case was to be fully reopened on the 13th of September. All of a sudden, a story that had faded from the minds of most F1 fans was thrown back into the spotlight as we awaited the news of what this new evidence could be. It later transpired that the new evidence was the driver's emails that were sent to Bernie Ecclestone, F1's then commercial rights holder. He then informed the FIA. This would lead us to believe that Alonso had followed through on his threat, especially given that Alonso, De La Rosa and Hamilton were all asked to attend. They were also told that in exchange, they would be in no way penalised, and as long as they were fully transparent, they would keep their Drivers' Championship points. But if it was later found out that they withheld any information, the FIA would come down on them like a safety car full of bricks. The plot had thickened once again, and unlike the distance between Monaco's barriers, as time went on, the intrigue in this case would only increase. On September 13th, the hearing took place, and quickly the FIA imposed a penalty for illicitly collecting and holding information from Ferrari to confer a dishonest and fraudulent sporting advantage upon McLaren. McLaren was disqualified from the 2007 Constructors' Championship and fined a record $100 million, less the money earned from TV and travel income over the course of accruing these points. Importantly, the McLaren team was also ordered to send their 2008 chassis for scrutiny by the FIA. The next day, Ron Dennis announced that he was the one who sent the information to the FIA about the drivers' emails in a move to save face for the team. Unfortunately, the day after, Max Mosley shot back informing the press that Alonso was in fact the one who sent on this information. Things clearly weren't happy internally at McLaren. And even though at this point it wasn't publicly known, Alonso had already made plans and informed the team that he would be moving to Ferrari for the 2008 season after just 1 year at McLaren. As for the Drivers' Championship, thanks to Bernie Ecclestone's lobbying and the cooperation from the drivers, Hamilton and Alonso were not stripped of their points and the title challenge was still on. That though would be a source of massive and still ongoing controversy, which sparked many conspiracy theories, a mystery that we will try to uncover later in the video. As we're aware now though, this case wasn't exactly closed. Martin Whitmarsh, who was then COO of McLaren, would later in December admit that the team did in fact have access to these technical documents. This would later cause McLaren employees, including one Paddy Lowe, to receive a fine of €150,000. However, before we could even finish the 2007 season, a lot more was going to come to light, and one of those was to include Alonso's old comrades in Renault. On September 11, 2007, McLaren had gone to the FIA accusing Renault of having information on the 2007 McLaren car, including but not limited to the layout and critical dimensions of the McLaren F1 car, together with details of the McLaren fueling system, gear assembly, oil cooling system, hydraulic control system, and a novel suspension component used by the 2006 and 2007 McLaren F1 cars. There was enough evidence for a hearing to be announced for December, and on December 6, 2007, Renault were found to be in breach of the sporting code. However, unlike McLaren, the team escaped penalty. And this we all thought would be where the story would conclude, and that we could now sit back after September and watch a thrilling three-way title fight to the end of the season, one which Hamilton was leading, and which, if he had have won, would make him the only driver still to this day to win the World Championship in their rookie season. However, the rumour mills started running at their fastest pace as rumours started swirling around the paddock and the wider F1 community that McLaren, and in particular Ron Dennis, were worried that if they were to win the 2007 World Drivers' Championship, that it would put too much of a spotlight on their car and cause Ferrari to appeal, and therefore put their 2008 car, along with millions of dollars in revenue from the Constructors' Championship, in jeopardy. Going into the Chinese Grand Prix, Hamilton led teammate Alonso by 12 points, with a maximum of 20 points up for grabs in the next two races, as this was back when it was only 10 points for a win. Kimi Räikkönen was the only other driver in the fight and sat 17 points behind Hamilton. That weekend, Hamilton qualified on pole, with Alonso qualifying in 4th behind the two Ferrari drivers of Räikkönen and Massa, after which he kicked the hinges off a door in the paddock and began claiming that the team had sabotaged his car's tyre pressures. As the rain fell, Hamilton led the first stint, but as the rain stopped, McLaren left Hamilton out on his inters, saying that it was strategic so as not to lose track position to Raikkonen, who had pitted for slicks and dropped back. But by lap 31, Hamilton was struggling and Kimi overtook him as he ran wide. At this point, Hamilton's tyres were literally showing the white inners, and McLaren finally pulled the trigger to pit his car. If he came out and finished second, he could win the championship that day. However, his tyres were so worn that he slid coming into the pits and got beached in the gravel. Raikkonen won, Alonso came second, and this led to a three-way fight for the title at the next race in Brazil. As we went into the Brazil finale, Lewis Hamilton was still 4 points ahead of second place Fernando Alonso, with Kimi Raikkonen trailing the leader by 7 points. This would be the first three-way title decider since the 1986 Australian Grand Prix. The excitement and, more importantly, F1 ratings were through the roof, exactly what Eccleston would have wanted. Even before the title fight had begun, it was already a strange situation in the paddock for McLaren, who had been appointed an FIA representative to ensure that both of the McLaren cars were equal in every way for the race. This was due to Alonso's talk of sabotage at the last race. It wouldn't make any difference. At the start of the race, Hamilton had a bad drive off the line and fell to third by the end of the Senna S's. He only needed to finish fourth to secure the championship, but an F1 driver of his caliber never settles for anything less than the win, and while pushing into turn 4 he ran wide and dropped a further couple of places. However, Kimi in the lead meant he only needed to finish 5th if everything stayed the way it was. However, more drama unfolded on lap 8 as Hamilton lost all of his gears. This would later be described by Paddy Lowe as a piece of debris that entered a valve, causing a hydraulic loss. This later cleared through the valve and the gears returned. It took 25 seconds for all of this to happen though, a lifetime in Formula 1. Hamilton fell back to 18th place, but his pace thereafter was absolutely incredible and the recovery drive was on. Thankfully, if there's one thing McLaren were known for at the time, it was their strategic might, their pit stop perfection. It was Hamilton's to lose still, or at least so we thought. McLaren pitted Hamilton for a second set of tyres on lap 20. The strategic idea was to give him a short stint on low fuel so he could catch the cars in front and then make his second pit stop, which he would use to go to the end of the race. However, soon after they decided that his second pit stop tyres wouldn't go to the end and moved Hamilton to a 3-stop strategy. This cost him a further 28 seconds in the pits and he ended up finishing 7th. Kimi took the championship by 1 point, with both McLarens finishing level on points. The amount of blunders that day for the McLaren team was extremely out of character, and up and down the paddock, most experts seemed to agree there had to be more to this. In December, after losing the championship, McLaren's 2008 chassis investigation was dropped by the FIA. The matter was officially closed, but most, still to this day, are of the opinion that there's more to this story. Finally, in 2012, Hamilton was asked by the race's Mark Hughes whether this day was bad luck or whether there was more to the story. Hamilton's simple response: "I didn't know at the time, but I do now, and it's not something I can talk about." Hamilton's comments to me leave the impression that McLaren and Ron Dennis played this entire situation out to a T, ensuring that the FIA and in particular Ferrari would back off their 2008 car and not lose McLaren more money and more fame. And this wouldn't be the first or last time that the FIA and a Formula 1 team have entered into shady actions and shady deals. In order to prove that, we could look at the Ferrari engine scandal from 2019, but that's for another video. I'd love to know what you think about this whole scandal. Do you think it's still a mystery or a wild conspiracy theory that Hamilton himself decided to wind up the community with? Well, let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe because that puts more wine on my wine shelf. And there's a video that'll pop up next that the algorithm has served to you. Talk to you soon.